Great Province of Alberta, Daniel Smith, Rajan Sawhney, Minister of Indigenous Relations, and Alex Porbet, co-chair of the Technical Advisory Group. My friends, I am very excited because today we have some of the top men and women in the room today that built this province through oil and gas. And as you know, oil and gas built much of this province and much of Western Canada. We are in Alberta very excited about what we're going to do. And while we continue to diversify our products, our resources, and our markets, oil and gas, remain our future for the next generation at the very least. Our government, and I think most Albertans, understand that reality. It's not news. The challenge has always been about getting our message heard in Ottawa and some of the other provinces, and making sure they understand just how vital oil is to our and Canadian prosperity. I'd like to turn the podium over to our Premier, who will tell us just how we're preparing to show Canadians from coast to coast to coast our commitment to turning this great country into an energy superpower and helping generations of Canadians have a better quality of life. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Minister, and thank you for the incredible work you've done on getting us to this point. I understand we have over 100 leaders from the energy sector in the room with us today, and it is indeed an exciting announcement, and I know you've done incredible work on it. Very pleased to be here not only with our Minister of Energy, Brian Jean, but also our Minister of Indigenous Relations, Rajan Sawhney, who has been making tons of phone calls in the last couple of days and ensuring that everyone knew who might be impacted by this, what our intentions were, as well as Alex Porbet, Executive Chair of Cenovus Energy and one of our leading companies in the oil sands operations in Alberta. We also have representatives from the energy sector, pipeline companies, and Indigenous communities. And we've come together here today because Canada stands at a critical crossroads. Beneath our feet here in Alberta, we stand on oil reserves valued at over $9 trillion. This resource wealth presents Canada and Canadians with boundless opportunities. This wealth would equate to hundreds of billions of dollars in government revenue that could be used to support core social programs like healthcare and education, bolster Canada's national security commitments under NATO, and unlock economic prosperity for Indigenous peoples. Not only would it allow for governments at all levels across the country to fund social programs, it would generate job creation and wealth for Canadians and Albertans on a scale rarely seen in recent decades. This type of transformational wealth cannot be kept in the ground, and Canadians agree. Over the past 6 months, it has become clear that Canadians nationwide see the tremendous opportunity that we have to unleash the economic potential of our energy sector. In fact, recent polling has shown that 3/4 of Canadians support building a new oil pipeline. Additionally, the global demand for oil is increasing, and the world wants more Canadian oil and gas. We've heard this from Asia, in Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and Indonesia, to name a few. We've heard this from Europe, and we know that we need to deliver on global energy security efforts. There are billions of people around the world living in energy poverty who demand a higher standard of living. This is not just a question of Alberta's energy, it is a global moral imperative. What stands before us right now is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to unlock our wealth of resources and become a world-leading energy superpower, creating lasting prosperity for generations to come. But to realize this potential, the federal government must make meaningful and substantive reforms to Canada's regulatory environment to revive investor certainty. The simple fact is that you will not see companies sink billions of dollars into new major projects unless the federal government overturns or overhauls its Trudeau-era anti-resource development policies. And that includes the oil and gas emissions cap, which we know is a production cap, Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines law, and the tanker ban, which have made investment in new oil and gas projects extremely difficult. And this is what we've heard from industry and potential investors. They will not invest in a new pipeline with these bad laws and regulations in place. You can't build a pipeline to the Northwest Coast and still have a tanker ban. You cannot have an emissions cap that is so aggressive that companies would have to shut in operations in order to achieve it. And you can't have enthusiasm to export natural gas and win the AI data war and then have punitive policies against using natural gas on Alberta's electricity grid. Now, I've made this case abundantly clear to the Prime Minister, and what I can tell you is this, that I am more optimistic now than I have ever been over that the concerns of Albertans are finally being heard. While we still have details to work out, I do look forward to reaching an agreement that will profoundly benefit Alberta and Canada's economies. Major investment is what grows our economy, creates jobs, prosperity, and enhances our standard of living. And without question, a new oil pipeline to the northwest BC coast would have the greatest economic benefit of any new nation-building project. For example, had we completed the Northern Gateway project, the Energy East project, and the Keystone XL pipeline project, Canada's GDP today would be $55 billion stronger each and every year. We cannot let another opportunity of this economic magnitude pass us by again. And that's why we are announcing that the government of Alberta will be the proponent of an oil pipeline to the northwest BC coast. With the support and technical advice of 3 major pipeline companies, including Southbow, Enbridge, and Trans Mountain, our government will make a formal application to the Federal Project Office under the Building Canada Act. Today, we are beginning the engagement process with Indigenous groups across Alberta and British Columbia to ensure that they can be part of this nation-building effort. That conversation must begin with Indigenous engagement, not as a checkbox, but as a foundation for relationship building, trust, and shared leadership. This will lay the groundwork for full and thorough consultation as this project meets regulatory milestones. To be clear, though, this is about more than just fulfilling a legal duty to consult. It's about working together from the beginning to ensure that we get it right this time, informed by Indigenous perspectives and experiences. We also want to have Indigenous partners at the table as owners to participate not only as holders of territory, but as co-owners of a project and an asset that will provide wealth for First Nations for generations. Our Indigenous Relations team, led by Minister Rajan Sawhney, will develop and lead an engagement plan in collaboration with First Nations across both provinces. You'll hear more details about this from the Minister shortly. And to get this nation-building pipeline project underway, Alberta's government is committing $14 million to the technical design and detailed application design. To be clear, Alberta taxpayers will not be on the hook to build this pipeline. But this initial investment is crucial to get this important work underway, and we cannot let billions in investment and future revenues continue to flee our nation. We have worked closely with our pipeline companies to chart a path forward so that we can provide a detailed plan to be approved by the federal government. This work will be guided by an expert advisory committee with a dedicated full-time project management team that includes the top pipeline experts in North America. And it is my hope, with Alberta as the proponent, that we will see this pipeline project on the next list of nation-building projects announced by the federal government come Grey Cup in November. With today's announcement, Alberta is prepared to answer the call to support global energy security efforts while creating lasting prosperity for Albertans and Canadians for generations to come. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to the Minister.
So Calgary, are you excited? I said, are you excited? We've waited a long time for this. I'd like to turn it over to Minister Sawhney now for a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Jean, and thank you, Premier Smith, and thank you to all of you for being here today. It means a lot to us. Today's announcement is about more than a planning initiative. It's a chance to reimagine how we build partnerships, not just pipelines. We know that prosperity depends on partnership, and partnerships begin with trust. Alberta's government is committed to a principled approach to Indigenous engagement, one that starts early, listens deeply, and puts communities at the center of decision-making. Indigenous communities are not just partners, they're rights holders, leaders, and knowledge keepers. Their voices must shape the path forward. Projects like the Cedar LNG and Solis Sims LNG show us what's possible when Indigenous communities lead. It's not just about inclusion, it's also about ownership. That's why we're engaging Indigenous communities in Alberta and BC from day one, starting at the very beginning of project design. We've learned from past mistakes, and we want BC First Nations to know that we've heard you loud and clear. We're committed to getting this right. Over the past few days, Minister Jean and I have spoken directly with leaders from nations in both provinces. And over the coming weeks and months, our ministries and the project advisory team will be reaching out to all nations along the potential routes. That includes engaging communities upstream, midstream, and downstream from any potential site or route. We're engaging on everything from route specifics and environmental protections to opportunities for Indigenous ownership, equity stakes, and long-term prosperity. This is about more than infrastructure. It's about economic reconciliation and building lasting prosperity together. Nothing is locked in. We are here to listen, share information transparently, and ensure Indigenous voices shape decisions that affect their lands, their livelihoods, and their futures. This initiative lays a foundation for trust, for opportunity, and shared leadership, values that will shape the future of energy development in Canada. Together we can build something meaningful. Thank you once again for being here today. I'll hand it back to Minister Jean.
Thank you, Minister Sawhney, and thank you especially for your leadership, Premier. She's just an amazing Premier, and I have to say it. Next, I'd like to introduce and call on the co-chair of the advisory groups, Alex Porbet. Alex, please, come on up.
Thanks very much, Minister. And I wanted to start off first by thanking the Premier for the opportunity to serve Alberta and this industry that has been so good to me and the country. I also want to thank the Premier for the courage to step up and try to break the logjam that has stood in the way of pipelines and greater industry development in general. As a representative of the energy industry, I can tell you that the industry believes that under the right conditions, Canada really can become an energy superpower, something that will benefit Canada and all Canadians. Recently, over 90 energy executives joined in signing a letter to the Prime Minister asking him to move faster in making the regulatory and policy changes that can make Canada a country where big projects can once again be built, and a country that can attract the global capital to build projects of national significance. In the last few decades, pipelines have lost billions of dollars in investment in pipelines that could not get the regulatory or political gatekeepers to reach final investment decisions. When people started talking this year about how a pipeline to the West Coast could be a project that should be in Canada's national interest, I immediately saw the challenge. After the experience of the past decades of years of wasted effort and billions of dollars in wasted development costs, no pipeline executives would go to his or her board of directors and ask for development money to build a pipeline in Canada. Industry told the Prime Minister and the federal government exactly that. The response from the federal government has been clear. They would only consider changes when asked by a proponent. No one from industry would be a proponent without the changes first. The Premier has called this a chicken and egg problem, and it is a problem she has decided to take on. Alberta will be the proponent to get this project designated and to get important regulatory changes made. Alberta will step up with a small early investment to break the logjam. The federal government will then have to deliver will have to deliver. In the right regulatory environment, this project makes sense to industry and will be investable. The collective team that will assist in advising and supporting the government has hundreds of years of experience in all aspects of pipeline projects, from Indigenous outreach and partnering experience to environmental expertise and science and engineering of major pipeline projects. Our role will be to help advise the government on how to develop the safest pipeline ever built with the maximum levels of support from Canadians and local communities. I'm very happy to join the Premier and the technical advisory team to get these changes and to get this project through. Thanks very much.
Well, I can see the excitement in the room, and I think a lot of Albertans and Western Canadians and Canadians are very excited about the prospects we have in front of us. I'm going to, with that, that concludes our formal program. I'm going to turn it over to Sam now to handle the news conference and the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now head into our media Q&A section for media here in the room. The media mic is just to the left of the cameras there. We'll be taking one question, one follow-up. Remember to please state your name and outlet before your question. We'll start off here in the room before making our way to the phones. Go ahead first at the mic.
Thanks. It's Tim with CTV for the Premier, please. I'm way back here.
Oh, hi. I see you now.
There's a lot of big heads in the camera pits.
You said it, not me.
To me, this seems a little bit risky if you don't have some sort of promise from Ottawa that these 9 laws are going to be repealed. So do you know something we don't know?
Well, we've limited our risk because we've allocated $14 million to get it through the first couple of stages of technical design. I just have confidence that if we fix the investment climate and get an agreement with the federal government to move forward on this on the major projects list, that proponents will step up and it will be built with private sector money. I've said all along that if the only way to build a pipeline is with taxpayer dollars, then this will have been a failed exercise. We actually have to create an investment climate so the private sector feels some confidence in investing in these kinds of projects again. It needed to be kickstarted because if we can't, we won't see a proponent until we have the laws fixed, and so we're prepared to be the proponent to get it to that point.
Perfect. And then obviously there's going to be a little bit of pushback here. We already have the Premier to the west of us calling this not realistic, essentially a distraction. So how do you plan to deal with some of the opponents to this project, whether it's the Premier next door, whether it's some of these Indigenous groups, whether it's just activists who don't want a pipeline?
Well, I would say this, that, you know, if we had been able to redraw the map at the founding of Alberta, maybe we would have drawn it with a little bit of British Columbia so that we had a port. Maybe Port of Prince Rupert would have been part of Alberta as opposed to part of British Columbia. But we didn't have the luxury of doing that. Instead, to make sure that we were a country, we built the Trans-Canada Railroad, we built the Trans-Canada Highway. We've partnered with British Columbia to ensure that their natural gas can make it through Alberta, through a pipeline to get to the US market. And we've wanted to make sure that all of the goods that come into British Columbia into their ports have free entry and free access through Alberta. That's the deal that we have. I think that coastal provinces have a special obligation to be generous in making sure that we're creating access to ports for all of our products. I know that Alberta shares that view. I have not publicly opposed any project that has been proposed by any of my premierial counterparts. I'm very supportive of any of their aspirations, and we're going to make sure that we can find areas of common ground. I would say about this project in particular, it was approved. It was going to go ahead, and yet a political decision canceled it. So this was a shovel-ready project some 10 years ago, and now it's a matter of seeing with the technical changes, with some of the advancement technology, with some of the things that we know about building to the coast, with some of the new expectations about Indigenous equity ownership. Now we're going to see if we can revitalize that and maybe have a shortcut because it was ready to go just a short time ago. So I will continue, as I said, to work to build the coalition of partners who are going to be on board with this. But this is a Canada project, and this is a test of whether Canada works as a country. Because if we can't build with collaboration of the federal government and between provinces, if it's everybody gets to get their products going to market except Alberta, that's not a country. A country is one where we support each other. And I think Canadians are there, and I hope that we can get more and more politicians to get there too.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. And we'll go to our next at the mic.
Hi, Lauren Krugel, Canadian Press. Following up on that, could you talk a little bit about what kind of conversations, if any, you've had with Premier Eby recently leading up to this? Has he been given the heads up that this was coming? And how confident are you that, you know, it's possible to persuade him that this is in Canada's interest?
I did give him a courtesy call on Monday to let him know that this was coming. And I saw his initial reaction, and obviously we have some work to do. I mean, I understand the priorities that he has on some of the projects that have come forward. And as I said, we're very supportive. We're very supportive of a optimization of the Trans Mountain pipeline that might add another 275,000 barrels a day. We think that's a great project. We're very supportive of all of the natural gas development, LNG Canada too, which is on the list, as well as Silisms and others that have been indicated that might get there. We think that that is going to be good for not only British Columbia, but also for us. We're also very supportive of talking about ways in which we can build interties so that we can assist BC in times where they have drought in being able to provide a secure energy backup and vice versa. We have a biodiesel facility that is up in operation. Most of that is destined for the BC market with their clean fuel standards, and we hope to do more of that. So I like to build with the other premiers on areas in which we agree. We don't always agree on everything all the time, but I think we've got a lot of common ground to start from. And I think as we continue on and build the relationships that will be able to I hope, win him over. I might want to get my Indigenous Relations Minister, though, to respond to that too, because I know that she's been making many, many calls to Indigenous leaders as well, and I think she could probably tell you what kind of reaction she's gotten there.
Yes, thank you, Premier. So like the Premier, I was on the phone on Monday calling many Indigenous leaders, both in BC and Alberta, and the responses were different from what you may have expected about 10 years ago, 8 years ago. There was more support than I had anticipated, and of course there are concerns about environmental protections, but the fact that we're engaging early and we're being transparent and having very respectful conversations certainly helps. This is not consultation. We're just talking about the initiative, and I have heard from many Indigenous leaders that they're very interested in equity ownership and being part of this energy infrastructure. So we're pleased with what we've heard. We know that there's a lot of work to do, and engagement has to be frequent, and it has to be, as I said before, transparent and very respectful. Thank you.
And I had a follow-up actually for you, Minister Sani. I'm fortunate that you're up here. You know, in your opening remarks, you alluded to, you know, learning from past mistakes. So I'm wondering if you could elaborate on what was done, say, in the Northern Gateway era that you're hoping to do differently this time.
So what we've heard, both from industry and Indigenous leaders, is that Indigenous voices were not central to the process as Northern Gateway was being discussed. So we've learned from that. We've spoken to Indigenous leaders and again in industry as well, and they've provided some additional feedback and advice. And the key piece of advice was to pick up the phone, go to the community, meet people where they're at, and tell them what it is that you hope to do, and really listen to their concerns and do whatever you can to alleviate or mitigate. So those are some of the learnings that we're taking with us, and we're certainly going to spend a lot more time in the engagement process.
Thank you. We're going to take 2 more questions from the floor here and then go to the phones.
I would also like to address some of the technology has changed, in particular on pipelines. They can tell now with some of the technology, they can tell when a moose walks across the top of a pipeline. Now we have double-hulled tankers. Some of the strictest laws, navigation and marine laws in the world come from Canada. So we have an abundance of change on the West Coast that wasn't there at the original time as well, and we've seen the significant change that's made.
Go ahead.
Hi, Premier. Megan Podkins, Financial Post. Mr. Porbet spoke a little bit to this, but can you address this aspect of this enterprise, which is why does the Alberta government need to be involved at all? Isn't planning a pipeline kind of the straightforward part, the part that that the private sector is really good at? Why is the Alberta government the one coming up with this project?
Well, I'll tell you a couple things. I mean, first of all, let's remember who owns the resource. The resource is about 85% owned by the people of Alberta, and the government of Alberta represents that. And we partner with the private sector through lease agreements to be able to develop our resource. And so what we hear from our partners is that they're not prepared to expand production if they can't get rid of these 9 bad laws, especially the emissions cap, which is really a production cap, and nor can they pledge barrels to a pipeline if the tanker ban is still in effect. So this is the problem that we find ourselves in, is that we as the owner, to try to steward this resource on behalf of our people, have a partner that's not willing to expand because of bad federal laws. So that's one reason. The other reason is I had an opportunity on a trade mission to be in Mexico, and I heard about TC Energy's success in partnering with the Mexican government. They have challenges too down there. But they managed to partner with the Mexican government, where the Mexican government began with the community benefits agreement, the consultation, the permitting process, and the company ended up focusing on the technical aspects of building a pipeline. They were able to get from final investment decision to completion on a 750-kilometer pipeline in 3 years. It was the biggest success in their history. And so I think we can learn from that. If there is work that needs to be done by governments to make sure that we can address issues of community benefits and equity, partnership, ownership stake, that is our job. We also have created a new mechanism. I'll give you a third answer. We also created a mechanism called the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, which allows us to provide loan guarantees so that Indigenous bands can take an equity stake in various projects. We've got 43 of the 44 bands in Alberta that have done so, 7 projects that will represent $1.3 billion worth of revenue. And so for us to be able to secure Indigenous ownership equity and underwrite it, we need to be at the table. So these are all of the reasons why the things are slightly different this time than they were before. It would be optimal if a pipeline proponent had a clear path to being able to get a project approved without the need to partner with government. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a world where you do need a government to demonstrate that they are a partner and are going to walk the path with you. And that's what we're telling the industry. We're going to do this. We're going to get it on the major project list, and we will be at the table for as long as the industry needs us to.
Thank you. My follow-up is for Mr. Porbay. How did, could you speak a little bit to the volume of this pipeline? How did the 1 million barrels per day size, how was that arrived at? And also, what is the producer's perspective on this? You spoke about why the pipeline firms aren't necessarily going to their board directors with, looking for authorization to proceed as a private proponent leading this charge. What is the producer perspective, though? Are these producers prepared to commit barrels?
Those are good questions, Megan. I'll try to hit them. I don't know if I'll do it in the exact order, but I think it goes without saying, and the Premier talked about this a little bit in her comments. Alberta has some of the best oil and gas resource in the entire world, depending on who you look at. We're 3rd or 4th overall. We have the world's most stringent environmental rules. We have the rule of law. We are a safe place to invest. Companies would love to invest in growing production in this province, but there's a really sad reality right now, is that it doesn't do my company or any company any good right now to materially grow production if we cannot get that production to global markets. And that's the problem we find ourselves in right now. And if we were able to have a regulatory regime that was understandable, transparent, but people understood what it would take to get projects permitted, to get pipelines permitted and built, I think you'd see an incredible renaissance of growth coming out of the Alberta oil and gas sector. In terms of 1 million barrels, and maybe the Premier, the Minister might want to talk about that too, but I think 1 million it's a nice round number. I think it is a scale of growth that our industry can chin up to over the next decade or so if we have that pipeline. If we're able to permit and build that pipeline, I think that's something that the Alberta industry could do. We could fill that pipeline over a reasonable period of time, and it would be a huge benefit to the Canadian economy, all the provinces, and obviously the people of Alberta.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll take one more from the mic here and then head to the phones.
Hi, this is a question for Alex. It's Chris Farquhar from the Calgary Herald. Alex, in a previous career, you had some involvement in pipelines, Energy East, Keystone XL, and you know how they obviously ended up.
Yeah, you can see the scars on my back. Yeah.
So what's different this time? What makes you think 10 years later that you can secure federal support to get a project across the finish line?
I think a lot has changed, and you heard Minister Sawhney talk about that with respect to Indigenous views in many cases. But, you know, I think right now, I'll give you my own personal take. Canada is facing great challenges with respect to our economy, affordability, housing, you name it. And we have a revenue problem with our country and with our government. And the Premier hit this in her remarks. This is truly a nation-building kind of a project. A project of this scale would add many, many billions of GDP a year to the Canadian economy, and all the benefits that would bring in terms of incremental tax revenue, employment. You know, I think Canadians have also realized that we will always have a continuing challenge about balancing environment and the economy. But I think what a lot of people have realized is that the world right now really needs energy security, and it needs energy affordability. And I think there was a view maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago that the oil and gas sector was a sunset industry, that all of that energy would be replaced by solar farms, wind farms, battery, giant batteries. You know, I think the experience globally over that time is that the countries that have attempted to go down that path have had real problems with affordability. They've had problems with reliability of energy. And it has been very challenging for those countries. And I think we're at a point now where Canadians appreciate that there has to be a balance between the environment and energy affordability, energy reliability. And that's what I think has significantly changed over that period of time.
Okay. My follow-up is for the Premier. Premier, the Prime Minister in the past has said that he would only consider a pipeline project, an oil pipeline project, to be included on the list if proponents came forward with a project. What indications do you have from the Prime Minister that he would consider a proposal coming directly from the government of Alberta? And how should we interpret the fact that Trans Mountain Corp is involved in this group of 3 companies that is going to help consider the development?
I would say that we've had great conversations with all of our pipeline companies, including Enbridge as well, by the way. And at the table, I think Alex mentioned that we have something in the order of 550 years of collective pipeline experience on our technical advisory committee, which says to me that there's a lot of enthusiasm on the part of everyone who has expertise in being able to build projects of this scale in helping us to move it along. I think Trans Mountain sees an all of the above approach. We've been very supportive of their aspirations to expand their production, whether through compression or some of the other mechanisms that they're using to dredging the second narrows. So I think what they see is that because we understand that things can be staged, supporting Trans Mountain, supporting Enbridge's expansion of its main line, and this is a project that if we start today, may be able to be commissioned and start up within 5 to 10 years. So I think that it's all a matter of scale, but I think it enhances the projects of every pipeline company for us to be talking about a project of this particular scale. I don't think the Prime Minister will be surprised. I've told him that you can't build a shiny new pipeline if there's no one willing to put the production in it. And to be able to get the producers like Cenovus and others to be willing to expand production, we've got to address the bad laws, the tanker ban, the emissions cap, the ban on being able to talk about emissions performance, that so-called greenwashing bill, among the convoluted process for approvals through C69, all of those things. And so the Prime Minister and I, we've got teams that are working together on trying to work through all of these. I know that the Pathways project is also one of the other projects we'd like to see on the major project list. So a brand new pipeline that would allow $20 billion a year of revenue when complete, with a project like the Pathways project, which we hear is about 10 to 20 billion. It's a lot easier to pay for that when you've got a new revenue stream. But to get either of those built, we have to fix the underlying investment climate. And I think that's the grand bargain we're talking about, is all of those things together.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions. We're going to head over to the phones. Operator, could you put through our first caller, please?
Your next question comes from Alex Belingle of the Toronto Star. Your line is already open.
Hey, thank you very much. For the Premier, you mentioned you've been feeling optimistic about the situation with federal regulations. I think you said more than ever. I'm wondering, especially on the tanker ban, since we're talking about a new pipeline to a place where, exporting major sizable tankers of oil is currently against the law. Without reassurance that that ban is going to be lifted and that federal law is going to be changed, aren't you spending $14 million to plan a pipeline to essentially a dead end right now?
Well, I'm anticipating that they will make either a repeal of that legislation or acknowledge that the port that we need to export from needs to have some kind of carve-out. That would be my anticipation. We do have Port of Prince Rupert represented in our technical advisory committee, and my Minister of Indigenous Relations has visited Port of Prince Rupert and talked with at least one of the area bands there. So we're already beginning the work on trying to figure out the technical feasibility of that as a potential port. I know Kitimat was the destination of the original pipeline, and at the moment there's a lot of construction going on the BC coast, so things have also changed a lot in the last 10 years. So I think it's worth it to have the conversation, but the Prime Minister knows I haven't been coy about it. I've let him know that repealing the tanker ban in whole or in part has got to be essential to getting a new pipeline built.
And just on that, my understanding from listening to the Prime Minister on this question, when he was announcing the first list of projects, he was talking about Pathways Plus, and was framing this, the grand bargain you guys have been talking about as, if they want a pipeline in Alberta, they need to do pathways and sort of connecting those things. Where are, I guess, on pathways, you mentioned you want that to go forward as well. Is the province willing to put up more money or help in any way to get that off the ground?
We have.
To help clear the way for the grand bargain?
Yeah, we have. We were first to put an investment tax credit in place. I know that the federal government were talking about it, and the time they were talking about it, we passed it through our process. So it's a 12% rebate on capital costs. And we also have just made changes to our tier program. That's our program that generates over $1 billion a year from our carbon pricing on industry. The pipelines, the Pathways group of companies pay about $300 or $400 million into that fund. And so we've made changes to tier that allow them to be able to use those dollars to recycle back into building out the Pathways project. So we have already made the two changes that we needed to make in order to put the provincial support on the table. And I don't oppose the way the Prime Minister is framing that, is Pathways Plus, that going forward with both. But both means both. It means also a bitumen pipeline as well, so that we have a new source of revenue.
Thank you. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Your next question comes from Robert Tuttle of Bloomberg News. Your line is already open.
Yes, hi. You said that you're confident that a real proponent, a private proponent would come through once this is sort of proposed, and I guess changes are made to legislation. But are you at all prepared to be a proponent of final resort if that doesn't happen? I mean, can you ensure that Alberta taxpayers won't be, through a Crown Corporation or something, the proponent of this?
Well,
Is that an assurance?
I can tell you that I think Alberta will need to be at the table all the way through to completion. We can't let our pipeline proponents have to navigate through all the complexities of a regulatory process without us being able to walk with them. I think that the requirements of Indigenous consultation mean that we should be at the table. We've developed an expertise now over the intervening number of years with our Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, and so I think that they will want us to walk the path, and we will provide our Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation loan guarantee to ensure that there's an equity stake for Indigenous partners. So that's all the reasons why we will be at the table. But as I said as well, that these are the types of projects that should be built by the private sector. Nobody has a spare $34 billion kicking around to be able to build a new pipeline project in any level of government, least of all ours or the federal government. We absolutely need to restore investor confidence that some of those dollars will come back. And you have to remember, we calculate there's something like $500 billion worth of potential investment dollars that have exited our market in the last 10 years because of these bad policies. So I have every confidence that if we get this on the major project list, It falls in that 2-year window. We walk with our partners every step of the way and get Indigenous equity ownership in it. I have every confidence that the ultimate construction will be done by the private sector.
And that will exclude government ownership or provincial ownership, is that correct?
Well, as I said, we have a loan guarantee mechanism that we are prepared to use, and that's part of the reason why we'll stay at the table. But if you're asking me if I'm prepared to spend $34 billion on a government-funded pipeline, the answer is no. And I think, again, it would be a failure of the process if that's the only way to get a pipeline built in this country. We have to repair the process so that we can get private sector dollars back here.
Thank you. And we just have time for one more question today. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Your next question comes from Amanda Stevenson of Reuters. Your line is already open.
Hi there. I'm just trying to better understand the timing here. Like, do you have a sense that if all of the contentious federal legislation that is getting in the way of pipeline construction at this point was removed, that there would be private capital ready to put shovels in the ground like tomorrow? Or is this like a longer-term thing where the private capital would be, you know, this might be something that they would be willing to work towards, you know, a few years from now as they see production from Western Canada rising?
Well, what I have heard is that there's a number of different project proposals that could be staged. I think that the Trans Mountain expansion to be able to increase 275,000 barrels per day is probably one of the earlier ones that would be done. Enbridge's, their optimization of their main line probably also would happen earlier than that. But if we want to get something ultimately built of this scale, especially if you look at how long it took to do the actual construction of the Trans Mountain pipeline, if we want something to be able to be in a position to deliver to market in the early 30s, we'd have to start now. That's the kind of time frame I'm thinking of. I think that Alex might be able to answer that a little bit more. He knows a little bit more about the scale of these things. But to be able to get all of the permit approvals and to be able to get to a point where we can get shovel ready, there's still a number of years before we'd be able to have first oil. But I'll turn it over to Alex, and he might be able to tell you a little bit more about the time frame or correct anything that I've said.
No, I think the Premier's comments were very accurate. I think the big uncertainty right now is that time frame leading up to the decision on the permit. Once you have the permit, then there's a pretty understood sort of pathway of things that need to get accomplished in order to get a pipeline built, and that is going to be a number of years, typically anywhere from 2 to 5 or 6 years. But the real benefit would be getting this project on the short list of projects, and hopefully 2 years or something shorter than 2 years would be very, very helpful in getting this project moving ahead.
And for follow-up then, I guess, what ideally time frame would you see a private sector partner making an FID for a project like this? I mean, ideally, what would we be looking at in terms of a year when that might happen, how long it might take to get to that point?
I'm going to look to my Deputy Minister of Energy because he's in direct conversations with everybody on the Technical Advisory Committee. But I would say that I've made my aspiration very clear. I would hope that we would have this on the major projects list by the time the Prime Minister announces his next batch of projects before Grey Cup, which he said is his aspiration, because I think that's the trigger. We have to get a signal from the federal government that they're going to work with us rather than block us as they have for the past 10 years. And so it's really very much in the Prime Minister's court. If it is on the major projects list in the fall, I suspect that once we've finished all of the technical work, which my DM tells me could be done by spring, I think that's when we would have a clear indication of whether this project is one that the private sector is willing to take on. I can tell you in the conversations that we've had, as we've been looking, do we go north, south, east, west, do we go to this port or that port? What keeps coming back is that this is the project that should have been built. This is the one that should have been built when it was first proposed, when it was Northern Gateway 1.0. So it's not surprising to me that we have so many members of our technical committee that are willing to help us do a reboot on this, because it just is the one that makes the most sense. If our aspiration is to be less reliant on a single trading partner and find new markets and do it in the most efficient way possible, Asia is the answer. They already like our product. Korea started receiving shipments and announced very shortly after that their 3 refineries would be accepting 1 million barrels a month. And I believe that there's going to be those kinds of opportunities as long as we can get the production.
Thank you. And that'll conclude today's announcement.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And to our members of the advisory panel, if you want to come to the front, we're just going to take a quick group photo.